Welcome to Headliners Forum. We're here to bring you the best in Texas journalism, the stories behind the great stories. I'm your host, Mark Morrison. Our special guest is Elizabeth Trovall. She and the Houston Chronicle won the Foundation's 2022 Showcase Award for Excellence in Storytelling for the series Haitian Odyssey, 10,000 Miles in Search of Home. Elizabeth and photographer Marie de Jesus chronicled the human story of Haitian migrants making the long and dangerous journey through South and Central America to the United States. Elizabeth, congratulations and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
A lot of Americans were consumed with the immediate border crisis when a huge group of Haitians arrived at the Rio International Bridge in September 2021. Tell us about jumping in your car for the long trip there and covering that breaking story.
Right. I mean, I got a Slack message at 10 in the morning. I mean, this is how it goes, right? It's a Slack message from an editor about, the photo of a large number of Haitian migrants in Del Rio. And immediately I walk into my editor's office and I'm like, okay, I can be ready, in an hour. I'm throwing a party on the weekend. I need to make sure my roommate can throw it without me if need be. So I call my roommate and I'm like, I'm leaving if that's cool, drive home, grab my passport and spend the 5-hour or so ride calling every source I possibly know who may know something about this, knows where to go, people who are familiar with Del Rio that could get me oriented. I set up, an interview with a respite center, for after I arrive, I figure out where the buses are loading Haitians up on the U.S. side, so I can kind of immediately get voices. That evening at 5, I showed up right before the Greyhound was taking off in Del Rio, right? That's where I started, talking to Haitians. And they were coming from Chile, of all places, a country that I know well, having lived there for 4 years. And so instantly I'm kind of connecting with people and waiting for these buses on the US side, and make plans then to go the next day and spend the next day on the Mexico side at the river, kind of watching people, Haitians mostly, but also Africans as well, and Dominicans, and go kind of back and forth from one side, Del Rio, to the Mexico side, Acuña, over this kind of shallow part of the river. And so people were coming back to Mexico to get food and water because there wasn't enough on the US side. And so that was kind of the breaking news situation that was going on there. It was a humanitarian crisis. Definitely people were kind of corralled in on the US side. But immediately I felt, that this was a bigger story. And I felt like, just covering the immediate crisis wasn't enough because people had, been traveling thousands of miles to get to that one point where we started paying attention as U.S. media.
Right. So how did you get that broader coverage and reporting going? You talked with your editors, I'm sure, and you made a pretty big commitment to getting on the scene down south and proceeding with the story.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky to the Metro editor, Lily Thomas, who's now at the Wall Street Journal, but she immediately agreed with me that this was a bigger story. And I started honestly by there was a shelter in Houston that I knew. I had interviewed Haitian migrants coming from Chile before, earlier in the summer, at that shelter, so I knew where to look. And I printed out a stack of 20 pieces of papers that all had the same exact questions. And my goal was to go to that shelter and ask everyone exactly the same set of questions so I could kind of collect some anecdotal data but data nonetheless about why people were coming, what route they took, where, what their situation was back home, what, like, a narrative started to emerge of why people were leaving Chile, why people had come to Chile in the first place, and why they had decided to come to the US. And so it was kind of with that date, not just the breaking news reporting, but then the kind of the follow-up reporting and getting some not hard data, but data, right? Tangible data, and showing there's this bigger narrative here. And I think that we can tell a global story, a global migration story, and migration is a global story, but it's so often framed from the perspective of a single border or a single community. And it really is the stories about people going from Haiti after the earthquake to Chile, South America, and then after the pandemic, after anti-immigrant legislation being passed somewhere like Chile, people and post-pandemic people getting cut out of the economy, cut out of kind of being able to support their families, and then making that trip then to the United States, right? So this is like many countries are a part of and policies in all of these countries are kind of shaping experiences of these Haitian migrants.
But the basic driving force causing folks to depart from Haiti sound like a combination of government and economics.
Economics, and of course, I mean, the post earthquake, the devastating earthquake in 2011. I mean, I talked to people who were in camps for years. Like they were living in, just in these large kind of tent cities after their homes were destroyed. And so, and the Chilean government was, they were allowing people to come immigrate. And so word kind of caught on that Chile, and Chile was open to immigration or more open to immigration in kind of 2013, 14, 15, and they needed workers, they needed labor. And so Haitians came over and they filled these really critical jobs for Chileans, for the, Chilean economy. But things, slowly started to turn as more and more migrants, not just from Haiti, but also from Venezuela, come into Chile. And it's a country that historically has not received a large number of immigrants. And so, and of course, there's, there's a reaction, xenophobia, racism towards these migrants, and it changed the politics as a result. And we've seen nationalism appear all over the world, right? And nationalist policies, anti-immigrant policies, and what we saw in Chile kind of as the years went on, and it's like 2016, 17, 18, and then even more so during the pandemic, you just see kind of I'm not saying that Chile was incredibly welcome at the beginning, but it definitely, the tone shifted, the access to visas shifted, and the access to jobs it shifted, especially during the pandemic.
They got desperate enough that they were willing to take on this trip north that they knew had to be very treacherous. What were some of the conditions that they endured during their journey, including traversing the Darien Gap?
Yes, I mean, it's a lot of, I mean, first of all, you stand out. If you're Haitian and you're traveling through Latin America, you speak with an accent, you're Black, you are, traveling with family, you stand out. So, at every turn, you're drawing attention to yourself as a migrant, and police are noticing, border officials are noticing, and they're going to try and take money from you because they know that you need to get from point A to point B. And so kind of at every step of the journey, people are trying to extract as much money from them as possible because they know how much they need to get to the other side, right? And the worst conditions by far are in the Darien Gap, and I say are because we're seeing a record number now of less so Haitians and more Venezuelans, but the Darien Gap is continuing to see huge numbers of people pass through it, and this is this kind of it's a jungle, right? It's this area where there's no highways, there's no hospitals. It's hills and streams and jungle, and that connects northern Colombia with southern Panama. And it's this stretch that's run by large criminal organizations who kind of own that territory or run that territory, and they're passing migrants through along with many other things, right? And there's animals, there's people don't have the proper footwear or food, the rivers will flood and wash people away with them. I've heard stories of kids or a kid breaking his leg and not being able to continue and dying there laying in the forest, a woman getting, again, washed away in the river. On the Panama side, people coming out and robbing and murdering and raping some of the migrants passing through. People told me point blank, if I had known that it would be so bad, that this pathway through the Darien Gap would be this bad, I never would have gone. And some people just didn't have the physical fitness for it. I walked a tiny bit of this journey, and I was very tired, very winded, and had equipment, and again was turning right around, and hadn't been traveling for already 15 days or 20 days. So no, it's kind of remarkable. Also, though, the spirit that you see of people making this trek for a better life, and also just kind of the optimism and the hope. And some people do come into it knowing how that they could lose their lives there, and they're still willing to make the trip for a better life for their children in many cases.
What happened to the Haitian immigrants who made it through all of that pain and suffering and got to U.S. soil? It wasn't quite the experience some of them expected.
Right. Many thousands of the Haitians that arrived in Del Rio in particular during that time in 2021, they were sent back to Haiti by a third were sent back to Haiti by the U.S. government on flights. And so think about, maybe you haven't been in Haiti for 10 years, and now you've traveled from Haiti to Chile, and then Chile to the U.S., and then you're kind of starting in Haiti, which is in its own, which is worse off, right, than maybe when you left it, which has even more gangs and violence. And the U.S. declared TPS for people from Haiti, but at the same time is sending people back to that country. More people were allowed into the U.S. And have pending asylum cases or some sort of immigration case. But many, including, families with children, were sent back. And I talked to some of them. So
you used so many tools to tell this story, the wonderful photography, uh, your narrative and reporting, of course, and multimedia, video, audio. Share a little bit about the way you went about doing such a good job of telling this story.
well, I have a background in audio storytelling, or I have a radio background. Actually, I was fairly new to print. I mean, I've done digital writing, but so that was immediately I kind of knew that I wanted to try and do something, at least from my end. I wanted to try and get as much audio as possible, and kind of write a story, but also bring people into a story. And I ended up partnering. I kind of pitched a podcast and then partnered with Texas Public Radio, and we did the podcast Line in the Land, that is, and partnered also with another journalist to try and tell the story through audio. And then, of course, I traveled to Colombia with Maria Jesus, who is this incredible photographer, now at the Houston Landing, who, I mean, the visuals, they really make the piece. They really show the dignity, the beauty of the journey, and humanize the story. And so I couldn't have, I think, been paired with a better journalist to accompany me.
Right, and you obviously developed quite a trust with some of the immigrants, and they were willing to tell you their story, and that made all the difference, because a lot of organizations tried to cover this story, and you really broke through and had the human side of it nailed down very well. You recently moved to the National Public Radio show Marketplace from your previous job at the Chronicle. Tell us about your new post.
Yeah, well, I continue to cover immigration and healthcare for Marketplace. And also some GA coverage of the economy. And it's really, I think that immigration is an economic issue, and it's a labor issue, and there are many ways in which immigrants are taken advantage of and exploited for economic reasons as well. So there's all sorts of ways to continue to report on immigration, but this is kind of a new angle for me, and so I'm enjoying the challenge and the opportunity, especially to continue to be based here in Houston and to be able to tell some of the similar stories that I've been telling, but through a new perspective, which it's a hot button issue, immigration, and so to be able to kind of cool it off perhaps a little bit by covering it through the economic angle, I think is a great opportunity.
We like to share the views of news professionals with journalism students across the state. What do you enjoy about reporting a complicated issue such as immigration, and how should students prepare for a career such as yours?
Okay, so what do I enjoy? I mean, I enjoy getting to know people who have really different life experiences than I do. I love to talk in another language and get to know other cultures. I mean, I think that for me, it's a bit of a treat to be able to spend time with people sharing their stories. And I always, I'm almost surprised and obviously grateful that people lend me their time, and then to know that it's not just me that's listening to the story, that there's going to be another person that's going to hear this voice and read about this experience, and ideally, understand a complicated issue with a little bit more nuance or with a new perspective. I mean, it's definitely a privilege to be able to tell these kinds of stories, and a responsibility I don't take lightly. And to prepare, I mean, like, I think part of it is just like listen to your heart and your instincts, and think about what interests you. If you really, I mean, just in your interviews, right? When it just comes down to interviewing, like what interested you about what somebody said in their response to an interview? Like that's something that, you should look for first when you're trying to write the story, is like, what's the interesting part here? Obviously, what's the new part is a huge question, but what's interesting? But also follow your interests. I after college, I moved to Chile because I really wanted to learn Spanish. I wanted to have an international experience, and I was able to, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that in the first place. And I worked a journalism job that I didn't like very much in Chile, but I loved where I was and who I was working with, and I understood that even though I didn't love my job, it was a stepping stone, and there was a lot to be learned from that experience. And so I feel like taking every opportunity as an experience, but also thinking about what interests you and what kind of experiences you want to have in your life and in your career, as that's a big part of it. And I really hope young people are interested in journalism, and they can reach out to me, and I'd love to talk to them about their careers and what they're interested in as well.
Great advice. Your editors at the Chronicle say you succeeded in unraveling a complicated international narrative for U.S. readers that has increased understandings of the factors driving immigrants. Our Headliners Foundation judges totally agree. Elizabeth Trovall, thank you for sharing your reporting experiences with us.
No, thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate this opportunity.
On our site, headlinersfoundation.org, you can link to Elizabeth's wonderful series and to interviews with other award-winning Texas journalists. For my colleague and Headliners Forum producer, Gary Pickle, I'm Mark Morrison.